It is the 900-page book that Team Trump doesn't ever want you to read or crack open or really even know about. It is the single most comprehensive effort to put MAGA's authoritarian vision and plans on paper. It's the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, and it is now bursting into public view in spite of, or maybe because of, Trump's repeated denials. Even in spaces where Project 2025 is not explicitly mentioned or quoted, the vision it outlines is on the lips of every MAGA acolyte and true believer. Semaphore is reporting this from a conservative conference this week. Quote, Trump comes back in January. I'll be on his heels coming back, and I will run the biggest deportation force this country has ever seen. That was former ICE Director Tom Homan at a panel on immigration policy. Quote, they ain't seen bleep yet. Wait till 2025. Wait till 2025. Trump's allies are not even trying to hide the radical plans for the country should Donald Trump prevail in November and serve another term. As for Donald Trump himself, he's once again claiming he's never heard of Project 2025. He knows nothing about it, saying in a post on his website, Truth Social, this morning this, quote, I have not seen it. I have no idea who is in charge of it, end quote. But the ties between Team Trump and the Heritage Foundation run deep and wide. Just ask them. Here's Trump back in 2022.
Because our country is going to hell. The critical job of institutions such as Heritage is to lay the groundwork, and Heritage does such an incredible job at that. This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America. And that's coming. That's coming.
And it turns out that the Heritage Foundation agrees wholeheartedly with what Trump just said about them. Here's the director of Project 2025 on a podcast in a clip unearthed by Media Matters.
I think, President Trump's very bought in with this. We're fortunate to have John McEntee, who many of your listeners may know helmed the Office of Presidential Personnel in what I would call the fourth quarter of the first term of Trump. But he is one of our senior advisors.
The Heritage Foundation will even play a large and public role at Trump's coronation as the head of the Republican Party next week at the convention in Milwaukee. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reports this, quote, the Heritage Foundation, that D.C.-based think tank that produced Project 2025, is among the sponsors of the convention in Milwaukee. The group is touted as a convention partner on the RNC Host Committee's website, and Heritage plans to hold a day-long policy fest in downtown Milwaukee Monday, the opening day of a convention in which Trump will officially receive the Republican nomination for president. Project 2025 and its autocratic vision for the country simply underscoring once again the stakes of the November election. It's where we start again today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. The president of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carusone, is back with us. Plus, NBC News correspondent, my friend and colleague Vaughn Hilliard, is back. And former top prosecutor at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann is back. Vaughn Hilliard, I know you've been pouring through this on our behalf. What do you make? I mean, they are one and the same. McEntee is as central. He figured prominently in some of the taped depositions from the January 6th Select Committee. He was the guy that Ginny Thomas handed the loyalty list to. I mean, he's been in charge of the loyalty oath and the kinds of people and the staff being pure enough and Trumpy enough since the first Trump term. He's the Project 2025 guy who's so proud of his association. He talks about it on TV. Talk about this bizarre effort to distance Trump from Project 2025.
Right. John McEntee was the former director of the personnel office in the White House. He was his former personal aide, and he is the one who is overseeing the database of Project 2025 in a senior advisor capacity, because Project 2025 has talked about the idea of having the executive have the ability to fire tens of thousands of civil servants across departments and agencies, making the case that it is the agencies and departments and the employees that should be properly executing what the desires of the president of the executive office are. And so what they essentially have done over the last last 2 years is sought to build a recruitment tool and ask questions of prospective employees who would be political appointees that would be able to then come in and fill these roles that were previously served by the civil servants. And, John McEntee is not the only individual. You also have the likes of Russ Vought, who was the former OMB director in the Trump administration, and he is one of the leading authors of Project 2025, that 900-page policy roadmap. But also, again, this is where Donald Trump, and almost in a way I feel bad for the folks at Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation for Donald Trump trying to disassociate himself, because these are folks who were doing this work on behalf of him and somebody, as that clip shows, wholly understood that they were doing this work on behalf of him. Russ Vought not only was a leading author of Project 2025, but also is the policy director of the RNC's platform committee, which just this week released their own platform. And so essentially he had his hand in writing both. And again, this is where that intersection between the two is so strong. And frankly, it is very difficult for Donald Trump, who used Heritage Foundation in 2016 to help build out his personnel and policies for his first administration, to have a blanket denial of his association or familiarity with them.
Andrew Weissmann, when I asked Angelo last week, we were talking about this, and I think we were talking about deportation, or we were talking about DOJ, and he said, this isn't even the scariest thing in it. And when I came back and asked him what is, he said it's granularity. We asked you, with that in mind, to read the FBI DOJ section for its granularity and report back. Tell us what you found and what you thought.
Sure. And I think I'm going to give you one illustration that I think explains why you are seeing this effort to backpedal, to say I'm disassociating from it. There's so much in here. Obviously, it's 900 pages. There's a huge section on the Department of Justice. But let me give something that is in black and white for viewers on page 562. 562, you can see it in black and white. You don't have to take anyone's word for it. It is criminalizing, that is enforcing by criminal law, the shipping of anything that could in any way promote getting an abortion. Any material. The criminal law is any article, instrument, substance, drug, medicine, or thing which is advertised or described in a manner calculated to lead another person to produce an abortion. That is explicitly called on to seek enforcement of the criminal law with respect to eradicating the ability to in any way facilitate an abortion. I should say the same criminal laws also apply to anything that would interfere with conception. So one of the things when Donald Trump says, I'm distancing myself, one question that should be put to him is, what about this provision? This is in black and white. Do you agree with this, or are you going to say, no, that was done without authorization? I had no idea, and I completely reject that as a possibility. So this is just one example. There are a lot more esoteric examples, things that I care about as in terms of the independence of the Department of Justice. But if you want something that goes to real people's lives in this country, on page 562, you can read it in black and white.
Well, the luxury of having 2 hours is we don't really need to get beyond this section, because we have the next hour and we have tomorrow. So let me stay right here. Von Hilliard, has anyone had access to Trump since people have become more fluent with these kinds of details inside Project 2025 to ask him yet this question that Andrew points out about? I think it's, let me read it. Let me put it up here. It's about enforcing the Comstock Act, right, Andrew? And it says federal law prohibits mailing every article, instrument, substance, drug, medicine, or thing which is advertised or described in a manner calculated to lead another to use or apply it for producing abortion. Following the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs, there is now no federal prohibition on the enforcement of the statute. The Department of Justice in the next conservative administration should therefore announce its intent to enforce federal law against providers and distributors of such pills. Has anyone had a chance to ask him about that yet?
No, and it's Donald Trump is not keen on doing interviews, and so of course we have not had the opportunity to ask him those questions really since he started to distance himself from this project. And, the background of this project here is, Heritage Foundation will tell you that they put together a similar book, a policy roadmap for Ronald Reagan back in 1980 when he won the White House. And so, I think for the American public, there is some benefit of seeing 900 pages worth of policy written down on paper. And for Donald Trump, he has been clear through his campaign that he alone speaks for himself. Yet at the same time, there are folks like Stephen Miller, who continues to work in the capacity of an advisor to Project 2025 and an advisor to Donald Trump. Caroline Leavitt, who is his current press secretary, is featured in Project 2025 promotional material online. Ben Carson, the former secretary, is one of the authors as well of Project 2025 chapters. And so for Donald Trump, I think this is where this is all going to be coming to a head, where some of these conservative organizations, I want to be clear, it's not just Heritage Foundation, more than 100 other groups have backed and allied this project, including the likes of Turning Point USA, led by Charlie Kirk. And each of these different organizations understands that a potential majority in Congress and having Donald Trump back in the White House is an opportunity to enact policy that they have long sought. And so for these organizations, there is a reckoning that Donald Trump can be used as a powerful tool to go and see this through. Yet at the same time, Donald Trump and his campaign team understand they need to win an election 4 months from now, and not every one of the policies stipulated in these 900 pages is exactly popular among the vast majority of Americans.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.